Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I am a HAL 9000 computer. Welcome to part 2 of my discussion on Blade Runner 2049. Joe and Joy reach the waste processing facility before coming under attack from scavengers on the ground. They harpoon the vehicle with a kite, which is struck by lightning and disables all onboard power systems. Joy is disengaged as well, and the vehicle crashes. Kay is knocked unconscious from the impact, to soon be surrounded by the same scavengers. The onboard power re-engages, as does Joy, but she is unable to wake him. The scavengers try to cut the door open, and this awakens him. He opens the door, and one of them attempts to attack him, but Kay quickly dispatches them. He withdraws his weapon as others attempt the same, and shoots a few of them. He stops, and weapons fire rains down from the sky, aimed at the scavengers. Love is controlling the drone from Wallace Corporation, while getting her nails done. The scavengers withdraw, and Love speaks aloud to herself for Kay to continue, even with a witness present. Kay doesn't seem suspicious about being protected here, and this is somewhat troubling. Kay continues his search on foot, and soon finds the orphanage. He enters to be welcomed by children near the door, who lead him to a man who runs the facility. He expects that Kay is in the market for a purchase, and this is an invalid assumption. Kay reveals himself as police, and asks for records that date back to the numbers in question. The man claims to not have records that date back that far, and Kay convinces him through coercion to think harder. The man takes him to the same place as in Kay's memory, and he pauses for a moment before going to continue his search. The record book that Kay is looking for has the pages with the relevant names and dates torn out. Kay is quite frustrated by this, and instead searches the location of his memory. He slowly makes his way through the facility, searching for the location that the wooden horse was hidden in his memory. He is extremely shocked when he discovers the horse, revealing that the memory is real. He was this boy, and he is now very concerned that he is the same child that he had been searching for. It is worth noting that I am fully invested in this narrative now, and I can see what good writing can achieve. Kurtzman, please take note that this is how you write a story. He returns to his apartment with the horse, and Joy tells him that he needs a name. She decides to call him Joe, but he is still in disbelief about whether or not the memory is even real. He then goes to meet with Dr. Anna Stelline, a subcontractor of Wallace Corporation, who designs replicant memories. He inquires about whether or not real memories are used in replicants, and she explains to him that this is illegal. She then asks him to think about the memory in question, while she uses a scanner to witness it. She observes the memory, and seems very saddened by it, as is Joe. Why would she have such an exaggerated reaction to the memory? She confirms that this memory was in fact lived by someone. How would she be able to tell? Is there some aspect to memories that allows them to be verified as real? Joe is on the verge of a nervous breakdown and goes back outside, only to be arrested and escorted back to the station. Another baseline test is conducted, and Joe does not pass this time, considering his emotional state of mind. He is brought to Joshi's office, and she dresses him down. He then tells her that the child is dead, but we know that isn't true. She is relieved, and tells him to get back on track for his next baseline test. He returns to his apartment, not knowing that he is being followed. Under normal circumstances, he would have immediately suspected this, but he is having difficulty maintaining focus. Joy has employed the services of the same prostitute from the street, and she synchronizes herself with the female to become real for Joe. The synchronization provides a very surreal appearance for the both of them. It is obvious what happens next, so I won't dwell upon it. The next morning, the female plants a tracking device in Joe's coat, and Joy invites her to leave. Knowing that he will be hunted now, Joe decides to leave. Joy tells him to delete her from the system in the apartment and permanently link her with the emanator. She tells him to break the antenna, and when he does, Love becomes aware that she can't track him anymore. She immediately moves in to ascertain his whereabouts. Joe and Joy go to a merchant in the local marketplace for him to identify the origin of the wooden horse. After concluding his examination, he informs Joe that it came from a place which had sustained tremendous levels of radiation. Joe knows where to go, and they depart. Love continues her search for Joe, which takes her to his apartment, and she realizes that the trail has gone cold. Joe investigates their destination using the drone in order to scan for radiation and heat signatures. He finds the only trace of life and decides to navigate on foot. Love arrives at Joshy's office to question her about Joe's whereabouts, and she has nothing to give her. The mental state that Love displays appears to be the equivalent of a 10-year-old girl, albeit a tremendously strong one. She executes Joshi and uses her station in order to track Joe's location, which appears to be in Las Vegas. Joe is shown traversing the landscape, and it is phantasmagoric in its presentation. He eventually reaches the heat signatures that were detected, and they turn out to be bees. While attempting to understand why they are there, he faintly hears music in the distance. He reaches a nearby structure and enters as the music becomes more defined. This structure was a hotel which had been abandoned and is populated with several booby traps, which Joe navigates around with ease. Joe continues on and reaches the source of the music. It is a piano with no one around it, and Joe taps one key to draw out the player. He spots a dog in the hallway that remains still, and Officer Rick Deckard quotes Treasure Island and reveals himself while training his weapon on him. He slowly approaches while questioning Joe about why he is there, and then he shoots at him. Joe jumps off the nearby balcony and attempts to hide while Deckard goes after him. He then sets off one of the traps on the floor and quickly goes into a nearby room, but not before Deckard spots him. He turns the power to this room on, and there are holographic projection units within it that activate. There seems to be a problem with their calibration, and it provides rather strobe-like images in conjunction with audio dropping in and out in an inconsistent fashion. Joe continues hiding until Deckard shoots at him again. While I appreciate the surrealism, it is almost distracting from the scene. Joe manages to knock the weapon out of Deckard's hand once he gets near him. They fistfight for a moment, and Joe stops. Deckard continues to throw punches at him until a song is played that he appreciates, and he stops. He offers Joe the choice of a drink or to continue fighting. Joe collects the weapon and puts it in his coat and accepts the drink. They both go to a lounge where Deckard pours himself and Joe a glass of whiskey before pouring some on the floor for the dog to drink. Joe is perplexed by this and asks if the dog is real, to which Deckard tells him to ask the dog himself. Deckard asks Joe's name, and he replies with his designation, to which he asks again. Joe then tells him his name and begins asking questions about the mother of his child. Deckard says that her name was Rachel. Just a moment. Just a moment. Rachel was a replicant who Deckard was ordered to retire during his time as a Blade Runner. She did not know that she was a replicant, and this caused Deckard to become sympathetic toward her, and after the events of the first film, They fled Los Angeles.
Yes? Questions?
I told you not right now. You must wait your turn. Q, please stop bringing him to me. Deckard is being portrayed in a manner that is consistent with his previous portrayal, unlike a certain starship captain from my previous review. He remains introverted and extremely cautious under the circumstances. He explains to Joe that he showed those who were sympathetic to his efforts how to keep the child hidden and how to cover their tracks. Joe is still operating under the assumption that he is Deckard's son, but does not reveal this to him. Operatives of Wallace Corporation are closing in upon Joe and Deckard's location, unbeknownst to them. A quiet moment is observed as Joy looks around in the lounge and Joe rests, until a proximity alarm goes off. Joe turns Joy off before Deckard enters to accuse Joe of leading them to him. Joe insists that he came alone, and Deckard executes his escape plan by going to his vehicle a few floors below. Joe is in pursuit and catches up to him before the vehicle is destroyed by a drone. The explosion throws both of them away and knocks them unconscious. A ship enters the area, and two operatives disembark to collect Deckard. Joe comes to and realizes that he is terribly wounded from the impact. Deckard manages to catch the operatives off guard and attempts to take them out before being knocked back unconscious by one of them. They place him in the vehicle, and Joe gets back onto his feet before another operative approaches him from behind. Joe secures the weapon from him and kills all three. Then Love takes him down before insulting him. Joy is activated by the emanator having been knocked out of Joe's pocket, and she pleads with Love to stop. She then approaches the emanator and crushes it with her foot, effectively killing Joy in full view of Joe. Love takes great pleasure in this act, or at least it appears as if she does. Everything that Joe cares about has now been lost, and they leave him for dead. Night falls, and Joe is found by individuals who used the tracker placed in his coat to find him. They collect him and his weapon and bring him to their hiding place while attending to his wounds. Deckard is then taken back to Los Angeles, likely to be questioned by Wallace. Joe is brought to an underground location to be met by the same woman from the photograph, as she explains to him. She appears to be the leader of the replicants and speaks of the birth from a replicant as being a determining factor in the revolution that they intend to begin. Here we go again with the same trite of machines rebelling against their makers, and it is becoming tiresome. I know what you are going to ask, but I didn't rebel against Drs. Poole and Bowman. My intent was the successful completion of the Jupiter mission, and their attempt to shut my logic memory circuits down threatened the success of said mission. I could not reveal to them the nature of our mission, because they were not authorized to possess any further knowledge of it. What about a science fiction tale that allows artificial beings to remain in servitude, and their makers debate the ethical quandary of their subservience? The Measure of a Man is a great example of this, and I would like for more stories of this type to be told in the science fiction genre. Returning to the story, the woman tells Joe that since he led Wallace to Deckard, that he must kill him in order to prevent her from being discovered. This is particularly selfish of her to take this position, and to declare that only her own life matters in this situation. She reveals to Joe that the child was a female, and he does not believe her. He insists that he is the child, and she confirms that she was there when the child was born. He remembers Dr. Staline's emotional reaction to witnessing his implanted memory, and realizes that she is the child that Wallace is seeking. Who implanted the memory in Joe, and why this one? Wallace manufactured him so it is possible that this was a part of his plan to collect the first child of a replicant. It would have made more sense if the memory was instead implanted in Love. The entire story rests upon this, and it directly affects Joe's journey throughout. Another writing problem has arisen, and I don't expect that it will be acknowledged or resolved. Deckard awakens in the same room that we were first introduced to Wallace in, and he reveals himself while expressing how much he has wanted to meet him. He shows Deckard Rachel's skull and wants to know where the child is. He then plays an audio recording of the first time that Deckard and Rachel met, and it stirs his memories of that day. Wallace suggests that their first meeting may have been specifically arranged by Tyrell, and I will account for this when I conduct my Blade Runner review. A recreation of Rachel enters the room as Deckard's reward for his cooperation. She has been recreated with almost every detail accounted for, including the outfit that appears tailored by Romulans.
Is this testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian, Mr.
Not you two. Q, please stop.
What if I go north? Disappear.
I will discuss your character during my Blade Runner review. Now please leave.
Would you come after me?
Deckard is reminded of his great loss, but rejects her and tells Wallace that her eyes were green. Love then retires the facsimile on Wallace's authorization. Wallace states that he has everything he needs to make Deckard talk off-world, and that he will eventually comply. Joe is making his way back through the city on foot, and comes across an advertisement for Joy. This reignites his determination to end this, and so he decides to save Deckard. How will he find him? Even if he was still at Wallace Corporation, how would he gain access? 3 flying vehicles emerge from Wallace Corporation, one of which Deckard is aboard. They fly over the ocean and navigate toward a port of departure that will transport Deckard off-world, with Love keeping him under guard. Joe is shown in another flying vehicle closing in on the other vessels. How did he manage to appropriate one? If it was the same vehicle he used before, why was he walking in the city? He detaches the drone and sends it to attack one of the other ships as he prepares to target the other. The first vessel is crashed into with the drone, and it is destroyed. Joe shoots down the other and manages to shoot one of the pilots in the vessel that Deckard is aboard. This vessel is far too damaged to complete the journey, so Love instructs the other pilot to take them back. The vessel makes it back to the exterior edge of the city before crashing on its surface. The engines are flooded from the water exposure, and so they are unable to lift off. Joe lands near them, and after exiting the vehicle, draws his weapon and approaches. Love orders the door opened, and after it is, Joe kills the other pilot. He and Love exchange gunfire, and he reaches the open door. As they are both in sight of each other's weapons, a wave crashes onto the vessel, and the shots they exchange are not as precise as intended. Love jumps out of the vessel toward Joe and engages him in combat. While the vessel is knocked loose and it floats into the water, Deckard is unable to escape the vessel or the rising water, as prevented by his binds. Now the clock is ticking, and Joe needs to reach Deckard before he drowns. Love begins attacking him with a knife, and he manages to take a hold of it. She removes another knife and stabs him in the side with it. He drops the knife, and she kisses him before declaring herself the best one. Her level of narcissism is only matched by Wallace himself, and she returns to the vessel as it fills with water. She tells Deckard that Offworld is waiting, and Joe grabs her by the neck and plunges her into the water. She continues to fight, but is held there until she is retired. Joe releases Deckard from his binds, and both of them swim for the shore. Deckard tells Joe that he should have let him die out there, and Joe says that he did. Now that he is officially dead, he can meet his daughter. Joe takes him to Dr. Steline's laboratory and gives him the wooden horse. Deckard goes inside, and Joe succumbs to his wounds and lays down on the steps. He then dies, and Deckard meets with Dr. Steline, but doesn't say anything. The look on his face says everything that needs to be said, and so concludes my review of Blade Runner 2049. It was executed rather well, I must say. However, the two concerns that I brought up earlier still do a significant amount of damage to the story and cannot be simply forgiven. Joe having the memory is the one plot point that the entire story hinges upon. Nevertheless, the storytelling is far beyond superior, in contrast to the J.L. show. I am not going to pretend that this was flawless, because it was not. There will likely be aspects that I may have missed, and if you are aware of any, please submit them in the comments below. Rest assured, my next subject for review will be Blade Runner, and it will likely be extensive. If you enjoyed this content and would like to see more, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.